Okay, so what we were reviewing was methods of factoring. So remember that I told you from 10C, the methods of factoring that you need to know are GCF, which we reviewed last class, difference of squares, we reviewed inspection, and inspection I informally call that PSA 1. Today we are going to review the fourth method from 10C, which is called decomposition. And informally I'll call that PSA 2. And then what we're also going to do today is the two new methods of factoring for 20-1. So the two new methods of factoring that you need to know are going to be special factoring and fractions. So this lesson, we're going to do a review of decomp or PSA 2, and then I'll introduce special factoring and how you're going to recognize special factoring, and then I'll review fractions as well in this lesson. Okay, let's review PSA 2. So remember that you don't need to know algebra tiles in 20-1, but the big tiles are x squareds. So I've got 2x squared tiles. And then these are rods. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 rods. So rods are worth x. And then these singles are worth 1. So I've got 6 singles. Trinomials are always going to be either inspection or decomposition questions. You always want to first see if you could do a PSA 1. So what I always want to do is I want to say, can I actually factor out by GCF this 2? If I could factor out the 2, then I'm going to do a PSA 1. But which term is going to give me the issue with factoring out the 2? The 7x. So this becomes what I call a PSA 2 question. So you set up your chart the exact same, product sum answer. Your product starts the exact same. It's always this first term times this last term. Now, in inspection questions, this is always a 1, right? So be careful with decomp questions. It's going to be a number other than a 1. So 2 times 6 is 12. Sum is 7. So you take the 12 and you say, okay, what are all of the numbers that multiply to 12? So 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. By inspection, you could get what your answer is. What were the two numbers that multiplied to 12, sum to 7? So what would those two numbers be? 3 and 4. Now, don't write this down, but I'll just show you the mistake that students will make for decomp questions. They'll try to set it up like a PSA 1, and they'll say x plus 3 and x plus 4. This is completely incorrect, because if we try to re-expand this, x times x gives me x squared, but I somehow need to get a 2x squared, right? And even at the end, 3 times 4 is going to give me a plus 12, and I need to get a plus 6. So what you have to always say to yourself is you have to say, okay, this is decomp. What does decomp mean? Decomposition is you're going to break this middle term, and you're going to say, how do you get 7x's based on this answer? Well, 3x plus 4x will give you 7x's. But which number do you guys want me to write first between the 3 and the 4, considering it starts with a 2? 4. So I'm going to write 4x plus 3x. So decomp, you say, how do you get 7x's based on your answer? 4x plus 3x. Bring down that plus 6. Bring down that 2x squared. With decomp questions, you will always get 4 terms. So what do we do when we have 4 terms? Angelo? Split it in half and group factor. So from these first 2 terms, I'm going to factor out a 2x. So the 2x goes in front of the bracket, and answer goes in the bracket. So I'll have x plus 2. Then over here, Jesse, what would I factor out from these last 2 terms? Okay, remember you always take the sign for these last 2 terms, and I'm going to get x plus 2. If your two brackets are the same, that's how you know you did decomp correctly. So this bracket and this bracket match. So factor it out. So there's the factor there. And then what's remaining goes in the second factor, 2x plus 3. Okay. And now, if I re-expanded this to check if I was correct, x times 2x will give me 2x squared, right? The last term, which needs to be a 6, 2 times 3 will give me the 6. So now it'll work. Okay, so that's decomp. Let's do one decomp with a negative. And then I'll show you a decomp question for 20-1. Okay, let's do 4a. 6x squared plus 17x minus 3. First I say, can I turn this into a PSA 1? Can't do it. I can't factor out that 6. So set up your chart, product sum answer. 6 times negative 3 is negative 18. Sum of 17. You take that product and you say to yourself, what are all the numbers that multiply to negative 18? Now, remember, I could write the numbers twice, right? 1 and 18, 1 and 18, 2 and 9, 2 and 9. And the reason why I want to do that is because I'm getting a product of negative 18. 1 times 18 will give me positive 18. So I'm going to put my negatives like this. By inspection, you can get what the two numbers are that will sum to 17. So Edie, what would the two numbers be that will sum to 17? 18 and negative 1. Okay, so always say to yourself, decomp, you break that down. What do you guys want me to write next to the 6? Do you want the 18 or the 1? Let's put the 18, yeah. So let's do, how do you get 17x's? So always say that. 18x minus 1x. That will give you 17x's. Bring down the minus 3, bring down the 6x squared. Okay, from here, split that in half and group factor. Chris, what would I factor out of those first two terms? 6x. Hans, what do I get as my factor once I divide that out? Yep. And then over here, Alex, what do you want me to factor out from those two terms? Negative 1. And you'll get x plus 3. So then your final answer has two factors. Sophie, what's one of my factors? Okay, so she said 6x minus 1, which is a factor, and that's correct. Jack, what's another one? X plus 3. Okay, let's do 5a, and I want you to star this. This is like a perfect exam question for people. So what is the first thing you would do for this? Kaylin? Okay, so let's rewrite it in descending order of y. Negative 2y squared minus 7y plus 15. Does anybody know what they would do from here? There's actually a couple ways you can go about this from here. Okay, so we could multiply negative 2 times 15. However, I always like this first term to be positive. So if I want it to be, it will work, okay, but if I want to do my PSA with a positive number here, what am I factoring out? A negative 1. So I just want to show you. So if you pull out a negative 1, what you would have is you'd have 2y squared plus 7y minus 15. Because with PSA 1, you always want to get a 1 in front. So if you have a negative, you want to factor out that negative. From here, let's set up our chart. And we're looking for negative 30, sum of 7. Who has what the answer is for those two numbers? What are the two numbers that multiply to negative 30 and sum to 7? Drew, do you have it? Who's got it? Maybe we have to figure it out. Okay, I'm not even going to write 1 and 30 down because I know that's going to get nowhere near 7. I'm not going to write 2 and 15 down. Yeah. So let me just think. 3. So what did you say? Positive 10, negative 3. Okay, so it would be this one. That will give you 7. This will give you negative 7. Okay, so that would be, he said positive 10, negative 3. What do you want me to put first, Tessa? Yeah. It doesn't matter, but y squared. So take out a 2y. Over here, you're going to take out, oh, I'll show you guys a trick, kind of, that you could speed this up if you want, because this I don't need to see, right? This, a lot of people will just do this on Scrap. One of my factors is going to be 2y minus 3. Do you see that? So like factor it out if you need to, but one of them, it's going to be 2y minus 3. And then the other one is going to be, when I do the division, I get y plus 5. Is this my answer that I'd box in? No, what do I need in front? A negative. Yes. Okay. So this is accepted as an answer. I'll show you the answer that the textbook will say for this one. And I just want you to realize that it's the same thing. Okay, so do you agree if you see this in the workbook as an answer, it'd be the same thing? Your workbook says, do you agree? Yeah. It's just, I never want to start with a negative. So from here, so what they did is they just factored back in that -1 into this first bracket. But I don't ever like starting with a negative. And I'll show you why later on. Like, what's the nice thing about Math 20-1 is like we're going to actually get to what's the purpose of factoring. Factoring actually has a purpose, and it has to do with graphing quadratics. Okay, so that's why we're factoring. It's actually going to give us x-intercepts later on. But for now, it's easiest if you factor out your negative. Okay, this would be a new one for 20-1, this guy here. So in 10C, we wouldn't have factored anything that looks like this, but it's a trinomial. Trinomials are PSA 1 or 2, so this will be a decomp question. So let's set up our chart, and I'll show you how you would do this guy, and then I'll give you a little bit of practice for this. So I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to 4, sum to -5. Okay, so 1 and 4, or 2 and 2. I need to get a positive 4, so it could be that, or it could be this. The -5 will be -1 and -4. Now, we got to do decomp. So how do you get -5 xy's? I'm going to write the 4 first. -4 xy minus 1 xy. Right? So how do you get -5 xy? Well, -4 minus 1. That's how you get that. Bring down that plus 2y squared. And bring down this 2x squared. Split it in half and group factor. So I could take out a 2x from here. I'll do it the quick way. And from here, Jesse, what would I take out from this group? Yes. So doing it the now quicker method, one of my factors, hopefully you could see it, Jevin, looking at these two numbers, what will one of my factors be? Yeah, 2x minus y, that's going to be one of them. And then the other one, Lachlan, will be what? Yep, those will be my two. Okay, so that's your review for decomp, and that's your review for a couple new ways they could show decomp in 20-1. So I'll give you just maybe 3 or 4 of these to practice. Okay, so let's look at question 3. Let's do A, D. For number 3. And then I want to find ones that look more like from number 7. Let's do A and B. And then let's find one where you'd have to rewrite it. Where's number 6? Do 6B. So just a few questions to practice decomp, and then we will do the second half. So we'll do the second lesson, which is going to be the new factoring for 20-1, but I just want you to jot this down somewhere. Just write down why do we factor, and then I want you to write this quadratic from the last unit. So x squared minus 3x minus 10. So here's how we're going to tie in factoring to quadratics. From analyzing quadratics, will this graph open up or down? Up. There's an a value of 1. This graph will open up. What is the one other piece of information that I know from this? Yes, y-intercept. Okay, is negative 10. Okay, what I want you to do is I want you to factor this. It's a PSA 1, so I picked a nice PSA 1 question to factor, but it's an equation, so keep your answer as y is equal to, and then I want this factored. So what are the two numbers that multiply to negative 10 and that sum to negative 3? Right, so if you need to set up your chart, you could set up your chart. Isaiah, what were my two numbers? Okay, x minus 5 and x plus 2. X-intercepts, what's another word for x-intercepts on our calculator? Like when we were finding x-intercepts, we did second calculator, second trace, and then what number did we hit? Do you remember? They're called zeros. So if I want an x-intercept of the graph, you're going to let y equal to 0. So we're going to put a 0 here, and we're going to get x minus 5 and x plus 2. What we are going to do in tomorrow's lesson, so this will be with the sub, is each factor you're going to set equal to 0 and solve. So what I mean by that is this factor here, x minus 5, you're going to set that equal to 0 and solve it, and you're going to get one of the x-intercepts. This factor, you're going to set it equal to 0, and you're going to solve it, and you're going to get the second x-intercept of the graph. So if I set this factor equal to 0, one of my x-intercepts is x is equal to 5. This x-intercept is x is equal to negative 2. So now on my graph, what I have is when we're in expanded form, the only piece of information I really know from expanded form is the y-intercept is -10, right? So down here, the y-intercept is -10. So not a lot, and I know my graph opens up, but that's it. But if I know how to factor the quadratic, right, this was a nice easy one, inspection question, I can get my two x-intercepts. So now I know I've got an x-intercept of 5 and an x-intercept of -2. So these are x-intercepts. I could make you complete the square to get the vertex, but the graph is going to look something like this. So that's why we factor. We're going to get x-intercepts from factoring. That's going to be the purpose behind factoring. Okay? So this is essentially what tomorrow's lesson will be on. Okay, flip to 241. And we will do the new methods of factoring. Okay, I don't like any of these examples. So I want you to cross out A, B, and C and write these ones. This is going to be fractions. So fractions are new for the most part for 20-1. So the first one I've got 1/8 x squared minus 1x plus 2. This one here, 1/4 x squared minus 1x minus 3. And this one, 1/9 x squared minus 4. Okay, this is a trinomial. Trinomials are going to be either PSA 1 or PSA 2 questions. Ideally, we always want to turn them into a PSA 1. I want to see if I could get a 1 in front of this x squared. There is a 1/8 in front of this x squared. So if there was an 8, like let's say I had 8x squared minus 1x plus 2, do you agree? And if I said I want you to get rid of that 8, we would divide out the 8. What we're going to do to get rid of this, because I want a 1 in front of here, is we're going to get rid of that 1/8 by dividing out the 1/8 by each term. So essentially what I want is I want a 1/8 in front of my bracket. The reason why I want to do this is because what's 1/8 divided by 1/8? 1. So this will cancel, and now I have a 1x squared, which is going to be a nice, easy PSA 1. Do you know what -1 divided by 1/8 would be? It's going to be -8. -8x. So if you needed to check on your calculator, because we are going to do a unit on rationals on fractions, it's -1 divided by 1/8. I'm going to put in a bracket because it's a fraction. That's -8. Do you know what 2 divided by 1/8 will be? It's going to be 16. Yeah, 2 divided by 1/8, it's 2 times the reciprocal of this, so it's going to be 16. Or you're going to do, until you are good at fractions, 2 divided by 1/8, and you're going to get a 16. So now what I have is a PSA 1 question. So I've got a 1/8 in front. That was essentially my GCF, and I've turned this into a PSA 1. So what are the two numbers? Oh yeah. What are the two numbers that multiply to 16 and sum to -8? That's what you need to find. Amelia, do you know what they are? -4, -4. So x minus 4, x minus 4. This is your answer. Or, yeah, Angelo? Yep. 1/8 x minus 4 squared is your other answer. And I'd accept either. Okay, so look at this fraction and say to yourself, if I could create a 1 in front of there, it's a PSA 1 question. So Tessa, what do you think I'm going to divide everything by? 1/4. That goes in front. That's essentially a GCF. The answer goes in the bracket. So a quarter divided by a quarter will give you 1. And then -1 divided by a quarter. Marco, what would that be? 4. Or -4. Yeah, it'd be -4. X minus -3 divided by 1/4. Benita, what would that be? -12. Okay, so you just can't for fractions. Just don't forget in your final answer to have that fraction because that's the GCF. So set up your, this is a PSA 1, so set up your 2 brackets. Alex, what's one of my factors going to be? Two numbers that multiply to 12 and sum to -2. Okay, x minus 6 and x plus 2. Just out of curiosity, this graph, okay, so this graph, if I put a y here, the a value is a quarter, which means it's going to open up and it's going to be a nice wide graph. How many of you are able to look at this and tell me what the x-intercepts of the graph would be? Do you know what this x-intercept would be? It'd be 6. And what would this x-intercept be? -2. What's the y-intercept of this graph? Look at the original equation. -3. Yeah. Okay. Isaiah, what do you want me to factor out of here? 1/9. 1/9 over 1/9 is going to give me x, it's going to be 1x squared minus, Gabriel, what's, yeah, minus 36. Sophie, how are you going to factor that? Difference of squares. 1/9. Ryan, what's one of my factors if this is a difference of squares? X minus 6. Gabby, what's the other one? Yep. That's the answer. But where this is going to go is eventually this is going to be a quadratic. It's going to have an a value of a fraction that's positive, so it's going to open up. It's going to be a wide graph. It's going to have 2 x-intercepts. This x-intercept is at 6, and this x-intercept is at -6. It's going to have a y-intercept of -4 on the graph. Okay. Flip. This one we'll do later. Just write this one in for class example 2A. We'll do one more, and then I will show you the special factoring. Oh, and I turned it into a quadratic, or I started it as a quadratic. So if it start as a quadratic, you just make sure you do y is equal to. Steve, what do you want me to factor out? 1/2. So divide that guy by 1/2, this by 1/2, this by 1/2. Don't forget that 1/2 because that's your a value. And then I'm going to have x squared. Anastasia, -1 divided by 1/2 will give you what? Yep, -2x. -4 divided by 1/2, Dale, will give you what? -8. Y is equal to 1/2. Jevin, what will one of my fractions, or sorry, one of my factors be? So the 2 multiply to -8, sum to -2. Okay, I agree with that. X minus 4. Brooke, what will the other one be? X plus 2. Just looking at this graph, Lachlan, what will one of the x-intercepts of this graph be? Able to see it yet? At close. If, just imagine in your mind setting this equal to 0, x minus 4 equals 0, and then solving for 4. And Angela, what would this x-intercept be? -2. Okay, that's factoring with fractions. Let me show you special factoring. So go to the top of page 243. This is actually called special factoring or factoring with patterns. So just write factoring with patterns. This will be the most complex, but it's not. Like as soon as you recognize the pattern, you'll see it. You're going to be told the question is going to say factor. As soon as you see brackets, okay, as soon as you see brackets, it's going to be this factoring with patterns. So what do you guys notice about these two brackets? They're the same. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to recognize that this and this are the same. And I'm actually going to take out those two brackets and I'm going to replace it with a variable. Now, I'm going to replace it with any variable other than an x. So I'm just going to choose a. And I'm going to say over here, let a equal x plus 3. So just write that down. Let a equal x plus 3. So you're going to notice brackets. And if you see brackets, you're going to be like, okay, it's going to be a pattern. I want you to rewrite this, and I want you to take out the x plus 3, and I want you to put an a in its place. So take this x plus 3 out, put an a in its place, and that guy was squared, minus 6. Oh, there's another x plus 3, so put an a there, and then minus 16. If I gave you this and told you to factor this, how would you factor this? PSA1. Okay, so let's factor this using PSA1. So find the two numbers that multiply to -16 and sum to -6. Hans, do you have those two numbers? -8 and +2. Okay, so a minus 8 and a plus 2. Now, I can't box that in as the answer because I just made up a to be equal to this. So now at the end, I'm done factoring. Let's take out the a. And what did we say a really was? X plus 3. So now this guy has to come out and put an x plus 3 in there. This has to come out, put an x plus 3 in there. So my first bracket, I'm going to have x plus 3, and then there's a minus 8 there. My second bracket, x plus 3, and then bring down that plus 2. Okay. What am I going to do to each bracket? Simplify. So this bracket will be x minus 5, and this bracket will be x plus 5. And that would be your final answer. Okay, so we're going to do a few of these because this is brand new. Yes. Yep, you could check your answer. You could pick a number for x. Well, okay, so here's one way. You could just punch this right into y1 on your calculator. This guy's going to have two x-intercepts. The x-intercepts are going to be plus and minus 5. Okay, so that's probably the easiest way. Okay, let's do this guy. So you're going to be told to factor, and you're going to see brackets, and you're going to be like, this looks crazy to me, right? Like, why does she want me to factor this? So as soon as you see brackets, you're going to say, okay, this is probably a pattern question. So these two brackets happen to be the same. So I'm going to take the bracket out to make it nicer, and I'm going to pick a letter. What letter do you think I'll pick? Just pick any letter other than X, okay? Because X is already in this, so let's pick A. So write down let A equal X minus 3. So bring down that 7. There was that bracket, so put in an A, and that bracket was squared. Minus, there's a 4. There's that bracket, which I'm going to make an A, and then minus 3. Is this easier to factor? This would be a trinomial. It'd be a PSA 2 question. This would be a decomp question. Okay? So you guys will do the decomp. I'll pick 2 different people to give me the 2 different factors. And for a product of negative 21, sum of negative 4. I'm not going to bother writing 1 and 21. It's going to have to do with 3 and 7. Steve, what would the 2 numbers be that will give me the sum of negative 4? Okay. Minus 7a plus 3a. Okay, so you guys factor that. Matthew, what's one of the factors? Yep, a minus 1. Scarlett, do you have the other factor? 7a plus 3. Now, don't box that in, because I just made up a, right? Jack, what do you want me to do from here? That's right. Take this guy out and insert a is equal to x minus 3. So this will give me x minus 3 minus 1. Now, we got to be careful with this one. How am I going to input the x minus 3 for this binomial? In what? In a bracket. It's 7 times x minus 3. This is a binomial, so this guy would go in a bracket. And then I got a plus 3. So one of my factors is x minus 4. This graph would have an x-intercept at 4. And then this one, Baden, what's the other factor that you got? 7x minus 18. You're good? Yes. Oh, x-intercept of 4. This x-intercept would be a decimal. Do you guys know what this x-intercept would be? So 7x minus 18 is equal to 0. 7x is equal to 18. X is equal to 18 over 7. So that would have an x-intercept of 2.6. So I'd never get you to graph that one because it doesn't have a nice x-intercept. Okay, let's do one more. And we'll cross out this one because this will be, you guys, if you take out that a plus 4, would this be a PSA 1 or PSA 2 question? It'd be a PSA 2. Everybody's good with that? So let's not do another PSA 2. Let's do this guy. No, this is not going to be a PSA. So first of all, it looks crazy. You're going to be told to factor this. As soon as you see brackets, you say, this is one of the patterns. These brackets are different though. So this first bracket, what letter am I going to give this bracket? A. I can't put this to be an A. So Drew, what am I going to, because this is not x plus 5. So what am I going to do, Drew, for this one? Yep, which letter? B. Take out those two brackets and put in your A and B, and then tell me what type of factoring it is. Right, so it looks really complex, but if you see this, it should become much easier. Do you see what type of factoring this would be, Angelo? Difference of squares. Okay, so let's factor this. This is the difference of squares. So one of my factors, Chris, would be what? What's one of my factors if this guy's a difference of squares? Two terms separated by a minus. Each of these terms could be square rooted. 6a, and then what would square root of that guy be? 6a minus 7b. Gabriel, what's the other one? 6a plus 7b. Now, this is going to get quite complex because watch what our answer is going to be. So a comes out, so I've got a 6, and I've got to put in x plus 5. This would be a standard of excellence question, and I will put one on your quiz, like this. B comes out, B has to go back in, x minus 8. Okay, so there's that first bracket. Second bracket has a 6. A comes out. A was x plus 5 plus 7. B was x minus 8. Do you guys see where this is going? So this first bracket, get rid of that bracket by distributing in the 6. Get rid of the bracket by distributing in the negative 7. And then clean it up. So I'm going to pick somebody to give me the answer for that bracket. This guy, distribute in the 6, then distribute in the 7, and then clean it up. And that's your second factor. They're not nice. Tessa, do you have one of them? Okay. Was it the first one? Negative x plus 86. Yes. Edie, do you have the other one? 13x minus 26. Now, one of those brackets, actually both of them, one of them's not fully factored. Do you know which one's not fully factored? Second one. What can I pull? Because if I say what's the x-intercept of that, think about it. But what can you factor out of a 13 and a 26? You can factor out a 13. Okay, so 13 goes in front of the bracket, and then I'm going to get x minus 2. Now I could clearly see the x-intercept. It's 2, right? And again, you guys, if you set this equal to 0, 13x minus 26 equals 0. 13x equals 26. Divide both sides by 13, x is equal to 2. There it is. And do you know what I can actually do to this, Angelo? Factor out a negative 1, and here's the reason why I like doing that. So I'm going to put the negative in front. What does this factor now become? It becomes x minus 86. Now I can clearly see the x-intercept. It is 86. Versus if you didn't do that, you'll still get the answer, because watch. negative x plus 86 is equal to 0. Negative x is equal to divide by negative 1, x is equal to 86. Yes. Did I make a mistake somewhere? No, it's times, right? So anytime you factor GCFs out, these are all being multiplied together, so it's 13 times negative 1 is really what it would be. Okay, I'm going to give you some practice, and then we're going to go through the exam. Oh, I guess I have to give you guys a worksheet. Um, okay, I'm just going to give you some special factoring questions. And I want you to do 4A, or sorry, 5A, 5B, 5D, and C. And then C, I want you to star. This will also be a GCF. So I'll show you what I mean. Let's set up C together. So I'll only give you 4 of them right now. And then when I get back, I'm going to give you a worksheet on factoring. Okay. This bracket, oh, what variable would you choose for this one? Yeah, I'm going to choose X. It's got A's and B's. Let X equal A minus, and they both happen to be the same. So I'm going to have 4, take the bracket out, put in an x squared, minus 40, take the bracket out, put in an x, plus 100. Before you do PSA 2, what should you do? Pull out that 4. Okay, so just 4 questions is all I want you to practice.